Okay. So I'll just double check. Hannah, have we got are you able to, are you back as host and can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, I'm back as host, Rob, yeah.
Fantastic. And can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, fine.
Excellent. Right, so we'll kick off then. So as I said briefly before, welcome everybody. My name's Rob Wolfe. I am Managing Director of Chai Consultancy. I'll get into a little bit of that later. This is a presentation, question and answer with a very expert panel, broad expert panel on social value of tech. And we've kind of subheaded it with CSR is dead, which again, I will come on to. This is part of obviously the Leeds Digital Festival. So I hope people have been enjoying the festival and will continue to enjoy the festival. There's been a lot of really good webinars and discussions, and we're very thankful to them for involving us. So what we will be going through today is, what is social value? Social value is a terminology that has sort of really gained traction since about 2012. So we'll just delve into what it is. What does it mean for your business? What can you do? What can we learn as collaboratively? And then the final question, which is possibly the most important, is why we bother with social value. Why would you bother as a tech business with social value? So first of all, CSR is dead. The one thing I have forgotten to do as I've delved into the presentation, just to give a broad overview of today, I am going to be cracking through this presentation, which will last for about 20 minutes. And then there will be a chance to ask the panel questions, and we'll get into a bit of a discussion. My colleague Hannah is going to be monitoring raised hands on the Zoom call, or if you have a question, then put it in the chat. If we don't get around to answering your question, we will be circulating the presentation. The video is going to be shared with the Leeds Digital Festival, and also we'll answer any questions specifically that we don't get around to that come up in the chat. We are looking to finish 11:30 or before, depending on how in-depth the discussion gets. So back to CSR is dead. CSR, obviously, if you're not familiar, stands for Corporate Social Responsibility. And it is about a business's commitment to the environmental, social, and economic impact of their business. Now, CSR at its best is social value. CSR at its worst is a PR-led exercise that is more bothered about looking good rather than actually making genuine impact. Now, there is a reason why I've put this car up there, the original Volkswagen GTI. As many of you will remember, back in 2015, investigations began in 2012 into Volkswagen with their emissions scandal. What they were doing is basically falsifying the CO2 emissions from their cars to make themselves look more environmentally friendly. As I've said, the investigations kicked off in 2012, and prosecution started in 2015. Now, the reason why I use this as an example is, as all this was going on very much in the public eye, Volkswagen actually in 2013 won numerous CSR awards globally for the positive impact that they were having on the environment, the positive impact that they were having as a socially responsible business. Now, this is what I mean by CSR at its worst is a PR-led exercise. Volkswagen were more worried about looking good than they were actually about embedding a culture of social value within their business. They were more worried about what awards they would win rather than actually their genuine environmental impact and putting policies and processes in place to further that agenda. So what is social value? Social value is social value is about your total impact. So it's the full project life cycle. It's the impact that you have on the environment. It's the impact you have on the local economy. It's the impact you have on the society as a whole. Broadly speaking, it's about the impact on people. It is your total life cycle. So if you're developing a product, it is about the design of that product. Is it about the manufacturing of that product? And it's about how that product is used, whether that's a digital product or a physical product, whether that's a service that you are offering, whether that's software, whether that's a service to the public, a retail, for instance. It is about that total life cycle. One of the other things that people forget about social value, it's also about your positive and negative impacts. We get very caught up in trying to monitor and measure our positive impacts on society. We should always remember that we also need to measure and monitor our negative impacts. And social value is about that additional value that it brings. Now, why the skydiving image? There was I keep saying this, and if you've heard me talk before, from the early days, I've always used this as an example of total impact. For the charity skydiving, for every pound that is raised through charity skydives, there was a research project undertaken in 1999, so very early on, that actually proved that for every pound raised through charity skydives, it cost the NHS £13.75 to put people back together after the injuries they sustained whilst doing charity skydives. So I am not denigrating the raising of money for charity, but if we considered the total impact of a charity skydive, that would have to include the negative impacts that charity skydives have on the NHS. This is the CHI definition of social value. Social value is meeting the current needs of your business and the communities in which you work. The important thing there is social value is not just about your external impact. It is also about the impact on your business and your industry. That is where people sometimes forget. It is also about your internal value. And it's improving at the baseline of social value. It's about improving the quality of life for generations to come. It's about leaving that legacy in the communities and in your business. So improving the quality of life. There are, since 2012 and the launch of the government's Social Value Act, which asks particularly public procurers to consider the environmental, social and economic impact of the services that they are procuring through government. There's been a lot of momentum around the social value agenda, and this Social Value Act was actually updated and came into force in January of this year to not just consider social, environmental and economic impact, but actually evaluate it. So if you are a business that is working with the public sector, if you are bidding for public sector tenders, the public sector now have to consider and evaluate the social, economic and environmental. And this is maybe something that you have begun to see already if you're bidding for public sector work, is that will become a minimum of a 20% weighting on the score of those public tenders. So there is legislation now around social value. And if you're working in that public sector sphere, and we are seeing this in growing momentum with the private sector also adopting this legislation, you will have to answer these questions around social value. So how does CHI begin to formulate social value into a deliverable sort of set of processes, policies, and further to embed a culture? We define social value across these 8 themes. So community, asset operation, sentiment, environment, employment, skills, and design. Every single product, service, or action or intervention that a business has will touch on all of these 8 themes. Where you have to begin to unpick them is, where does your major influence lie? Which themes do your business decisions and your business, your products, your services have an influence over? What can you have the most impact by focusing on? The one thing that is most important about social value, and this was actually brought up to us by a recent client, when they put it beautifully by saying, social value is not about inhaling your own smoke. Social value is not about mitigating the negative impact of your business. Social value is about the additional benefit that you bring once you have inhaled that smoke. So if you are delivering a service that has a negative impact, firstly, you mitigate that impact, then you start to add value. That's where social value sits. What does it mean for your business? This is where we try and get into how it can actually have an impact on your business. Most major cities, including Leeds, now have a digital strategy. There's funding, there's support, there's advice, there's guidance, there's lots of businesses. Leeds Digital Festival is a sort of is a result of this. And it is having a major impact in cities around the talent that is coming into the industry. Social value has an impact on the collaboration, the cross collaboration, the knowledge transfers, thinking about products and services differently. Who else can be involved? With investment, pension funds, government funds, private enterprise funding are now focusing more on the social and environment impacts of their investments, as well as the financial returns. As I've said previously, there's a lot of grant funding out there to support the development of digital services, the development of digital services, digital products, technology that has a positive impact on the environment and society. It increases sales. There's a big consumer focus, which we will come on to, that people are asking the questions around products and services. What impact does this have on the environment? And all of those combined can help drive growth within a business. So what can you do? We break up social value into three distinct areas. Firstly is the operational area. So this is about your internal impact. How do your policies, processes have an impact on your staff to embed a culture of social value? This is about the health and well-being of your staff. In 2015, there was a research project that actually highlighted that 42% of staff are looking to work for businesses that have a positive impact on society. 44% of those answering the questions within the survey said that having a positive impact on society was more important than money when choosing a job. In 2019, the Financial Times ran a survey that showed that more interviewees, more people looking to join businesses, to be recruited into businesses, were asking specific questions on their that business's social and environmental impact. You may well have experienced this yourselves, and I'd be interested to hear your views. In 2021, post-pandemic, post-climate change, not post-climate change, it's obviously been going on, but the rising agenda of climate change. This has really focused people's attention on these agendas, on the social and the environmental impacts of business. And it's becoming more and more prevalent, both in investment and in the questions from your staff. The second is project and product value. So this is mainly policy-led. As I've said, if you're working in the public sphere, you will have to answer questions specifically as part of those tenders on how your service or your product development is going to impact society and the environment. That comes down to local policies around local recruitment and training, how you are spending the money from that project or product or service, how that is engaging and spending that money locally to boost the local economy. How is it having an impact on the future skills? We've worked with many people in the past, Coders Guild, the Ahead Partnership in Leeds, who are really looking to improve the digital skills of our young people coming through, getting them employee ready to have an equal, accessible and diverse workforce coming into the market to develop those socially and environmentally positive products and projects of the future. And the last one is the end of the journey. This is when you move to external value. So this is about your businesses, your products, your services, their legacy, and how you embed a culture of social value and value-based decision making. So you're not just looking at new products and services based purely on financial return, but you're actually considering the environmental and social impact of the development and delivery of those products. So these combined, focusing on these areas combined, allows you to, as I've said, make value-based decision-making within your business, have that as part of a culture, and generates real, tangible social value within your business and for your stakeholders. So how do we start? One of the biggest questions we get within Chai Consultancy is, how do you begin to start articulating that value? How do you measure it? How do you monitor it? The first thing is around articulating it across multiple frameworks. There is not one standard way of doing this. So you really have to think about what's best for your business. Where do your influence and interventions lie? Where are you going to make the most change? At the center of that circle, you have social value outputs, outcomes, and themes. So what impact are you having in terms of KPIs? Are you creating employment? Are you delivering skills? Are you engaging with thousands of young people through the development of a new app, for instance? They are the KPIs. How diverse are the people engaging with your products or services? How diverse are your employees and your staff? The outcomes is what impact they actually have. So what are the long-term outcomes? So a job, how good is that job? Is it a quality job? Is it well paid? Is it sustainable? Is it long-term? Is it direct? Is it on a direct PAYE contract, for instance, or is it through an agency? With government legislation, we then move on to the triple bottom line, so environment, social, and economic. And more investors now are looking at what's termed as ESG, which you may have heard, which is environmental and social governance. So this is a sort of an arm of financial investing where they want to report on people's environmental and social impact. We then move on to local authorities' plans and strategies. So within Leeds, they have an inclusive growth strategy, and they were one of the first to embed this within their decision making. They have a digital strategy. They have a health and well-being strategy for those communities. So how do we make sure that our interventions and our investments as a Leeds business benefit the communities and the health and well-being of those communities, whether that's the residential community, whether that's the business community within the Leeds area? And all this work and all of the themes and all of the outcomes that Leeds want to achieve are there as public documents, and you can see how your interventions fit into them. One of the sustainability angles that is coming through is what's called the 5 capitals. So this is looking at the human, the social, the environment, the natural, the produced capital, and the economic capital. So these are overarching themes that are looking at beginning to measure the impact across those themes. And then one of the most common themes that is a global measurement framework, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I will come on to very briefly. I've realized I am talking, so I will speed up. These are the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and these are a very good place to start if your business is looking at compartmentalizing the actions that you take. Which of these 17 themes does your business want to have an impact on? Where do these themes, where does your influence lie? What can you change within these themes? Where are your resources best put within these themes? So the questions we need to answer within a business: your influence. Where does your influence lie? There is no point in investing huge amounts of resources, time and effort into trying to change something that your business doesn't actually have enough influence to change. So you need to think about where you have that influence. What interventions are going to manifest that change? So how do you create that change that you want to change? How do you, what's passionate to your business, to your staff? And how do your interventions, what best interventions can help manifest that change? And then finally, your impact. Once you've decided on what you want to change, once you've decided on how you want to take social value forward within your business, how do you begin to measure and monitor your progress? So what can we learn? This is very, very quick. We started off as Chai Consultancy in 2006. There was a lot of investment coming into Leeds, and we wanted to make sure that that investment benefited the communities that surround, the deprived communities that surrounded. When I started in 2006, I was basically, through the partnership, including Leeds City Council, I was given a laptop and a park bench and said, let's see how we can work this out. At that point, I was called a care bear. It was called the fluffy stuff. It was about competition between local third sector partner agencies. It was about coercion of the commercial sector to try and coerce them into doing good. As we move forward to 2021, it has become a culture within a lot of these businesses that there's a lot more of cross-sector collaboration. And there are actually, as mentioned before with the Social Value Act, there are actually KPIs and outcomes that need to be measured within contracts. So it's very much become front and center within how businesses approach. So how do we take this culture forward? How do we take this collaboration forward? How do we answer those contracts to help businesses within the tech sector win more public contracts? The one thing I would say here is there's a lot of learning that Chai has done over the last 15 years, and let's not wait till 2036 to get this right in the tech sector. There's a lot of learning that organizations like Chai Consultancy can bring from other sectors within the built environment, for instance, who are very early adopters of social value, into these new sectors. So lastly, why bother? We've gone through this already. It improves talent. It improves diverse thinking within your business. It improves creativity. People are asking about social environmental impact. It is important to your future workforce. It helps improve the talent within your business. It helps growth. 60% of consumers are now asking and are more mindful of where they buy their products and services from. They want to buy those products and services from environmentally and socially beneficial businesses. And this is something that I came across a while ago, but it really sums up social value for me. It's about having a purpose within your business, a purpose beyond just making money. And this is a philosophy the most high profile Desmond Tutu is one of the most high profile sort of talking about this philosophy of Ubuntu. I am because we are. We measure the success of who we are by our impact on other people. And I think that is where is really at the heart of social value. And to put it bluntly, this is one of the biggest questions that you can help answer, is basically, I'll leave it there. So that brings me finally to the presentation. So if I could ask the panel members to switch on their cameras, please, and I will stop sharing my screen. Fantastic. So before we start opening questions up to the floor, I was just wondering if I could bring the panel members in just to give a brief introduction to themselves and their business, and as well just highlight what social value means to you. So Neil McDonald, I'd like to start with you, please.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm CEO at Thrive. Thrive is a software platform, and we help organizations, both public and private sector, to capture, to value, and to report on the social value that they're creating. As I say, we work with both public and private sectors, so the likes of NHS, City of London on the public sector side. On private sector, we really work with organizations, anything from 100 employees up to multiple tens of thousands of employees. So from medium-sized construction contractors through to the Tesco, retailers like L'Oreal, global solicitors firms, a really diverse bunch. And as Rob alluded to earlier on in the presentation, that we're definitely seeing a higher number of inquiries through from the tech sector, largely driven by the procurement side. So tech companies that are contracting into the central or local government, wanting to improve their social value monitoring and reporting, and that side of things. And for us, really, as an organization that helps other organizations with this, for us, what does social value mean? I guess it's the value created by an organization beyond revenue and profits, under the broad themes of well-being, community, environmental, and economic improvement. So roughly aligned to what Rob has already said there. And for us, the big point here, and the wider societal point is, 75% of people are employed in the UK, and so that is a lot of people that work for a lot of organizations. So it's the power of organizations, whether they're public and private sector, to improve society, and by channeling all of this, that in line with what Rob has said today, the power of organizations to deliver that is absolutely huge. And for us then, for us as a business, if we're helping organizations through our software to monitor, to report on social value, what we're actually aiming to do is to set up this virtuous circle. And so if we can, there are lots of studies now, Rob alluded to some of them, there are lots of studies now that basically are saying businesses with a clear purpose beyond profit, are leading the way, in terms of actually their bottom line. There's Harvard Business Study reports, there's FTSE analysis. These organizations are outperforming those. And in fact, there's a great term that I came across the other day from Larry Fink from BlackRock Capital, who called it the sustainability premium. So when done well, it has been proven already that organizations and businesses will have a sustainability premium, in terms of customer sentiment, employ all of those aspects Rob talked about. So the point I was coming to was our purpose as an organization, by helping other organizations to clearly monitor and evidence and report on what they're doing. It's to set up this virtuous circle whereby if that then creates a positive on the bottom line for the business in some fashion, then that organization will be more invested in investing more into the environmental agenda, social aspects, whatever it might be for their particular organization. And then that feeds back to an even better bottom line, and this virtuous circle is set up. So Rob, that's a general introduction to us and what social value means to us.
Thank you very much, Neil. And I think that generally, that I've sort of made a note of that, the power of organizations to improve society. I think that's what's really driving this social agenda. So to bring Ed in from Strange Thoughts, I'll let you introduce yourself, Ed, but you've been on this journey. We started working with you. You were one of our first sort of tech clients, I suppose, back in 2018. So I just wondered whether you could just, introduce Strange Thoughts, but as well, just talk a little bit about, your journey and how it's maybe had an impact on the decisions you make within your business.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Ed. I'm Managing Director of Strange Thoughts. We are a product design agency that works with our clients to build wild and wacky ideas, whether that's digital or physical. And so, yes, our journey with social value started back in 2018 with Rob. And for us, it's about realizing what we can do, what we're passionate about, and how we can have an impact based on those things. So for us, it is twofold. So the things we are most passionate about is, one, our network and the way we work with people. We work with a lot of extremely talented individuals within our line of work as we build a variety of projects. So it's about connecting those individuals that might not have access to the kind of commercial projects that we work on, and it's about kind of creating a bilateral conversation with those people in which they can benefit each other. And the second thing is our use of IP. So a lot of the time, because we work on marketing campaigns mostly, we put in a lot of development time into creating a product that is used once or is used over a brief period of time. So how can we take that product, take that development time, and perhaps apply it to something which does have some social value? So an example of that might be that we worked on a building product called Landmark, which is a content mapping system. So think Pokemon Go for brands. And we built a mapping system for one of the big record labels. But once that campaign was finished, we were able to repurpose that project and offer it up to a charity called Tackle Africa, which is a HIV awareness charity. And during the pandemic, they were, their revenue streams were completely obliterated, as most of their donation functionality was through in-person events. So what we allowed them to do was create a digital experience, which was there to educate people, to raise donations, and to just further the image of Tackle Africa and make it more accessible to people. And we were extremely pleased that we could do that. And it came from, work that we'd already been doing, but we could use that IP to kind of do some good, do some social good. So those are the kind of two areas that we are focused in on.
Thanks very much, Ed. And I think that really highlights the point I was making before about the fact that it's about looking at your products and your services in a slightly different way. Like you mentioned about, well, how could this be used to improve the health and well-being, to improve a purpose of a charitable organization? How can this tech be transferred? And I think that's what I really got from that, Ed. And it's, the Tackle Africa work, we worked with you on a little bit of that campaign, and it massively supported and helped them sustain that charity through what was a very, very challenging 18 months. So it had real tangible impact on the people that they work with across Africa. So that was absolutely fantastic. So last but not least, I'd like to bring in Tom Mather. So Tom, I'll let you introduce yourself. But again, we started working with you back in 2018, and you're very much coming from the built environment angle, which I mentioned we're kind of early adopters of social value. It's very much our sector that we started working with back in 2006. So I just, what I was kind of hoping to get from yourself today, Tom, was the kind of your journey and what you learned within that social value framework.
So I think to just background on what I do. So I work for a company called Be First, who are wholly owned subsidiary of Barking and Dagenham Council. So I know most of you guys are Leeds and North of England based, but Barking and Dagenham is from a social deprivation perspective is one of the most deprived council areas in the country. I think if you look at metrics on life expectancy, qualifications above a grade C or equivalency, youth employment, it's in the top 10 of the bottom 10, should I say, of most of local authorities in the country. And so when I took my job there, we were BeFirst was set the challenge of delivering 5,000 new homes primarily, so rundown council estates needed renewing, and borrowed roughly £750 million worth of public loan, works board and council tax receipts and a bit of private investment, but borrowed a lot of public money in order to do this. And when I took a look at it, there's a few things that didn't sit right with me. So traditionally in the built environment, the planning authority, i.e. in this case Barking and Dagenham, would use section 106 to stick social value, or CSR as it was, obligations on developers, which would typically be 25% of your employees and 25% of your spend must be spent locally. But then the term locally was based on a CITB figure of 50 miles from the place that you were developing. So if you're developing in London and you're thinking 50 miles, draw a circle around, it's pretty much anywhere within the M25, a little bit out of the M25 and down into Kent and Essex. So it didn't really work for me. So when I first spoke to Rob about it, we got in a like-minded position, and my view was that you can't go and invest this amount of money in a deprived area and not leave a lasting legacy. And a lasting legacy is not about having nice council-owned homes for people to move into. It's about ensuring that those people are left with the tools to enable them to not just survive but thrive in those new estates. So we don't do exactly what happened in the 1970s in Barking and Dagenham, build large council-owned estates which fall into disrepair, which end up with crime and low levels of employment and low levels of life expectancy, and the metrics around that. So what we did is we worked on a framework with a number of contractors who were bought into it, which focused on more than just those section 106 obligations. So we looked at how we could essentially determine the outputs that we wanted, that we weren't necessarily just about local labour and local suppliers. And the areas that we focused on was about essentially about apprenticeships for the starting point. And the way we looked at it was that if you get someone who is young and intervene early enough and get them a good quality job, and that's a high skilled, high paid, long-term job, then that person will have better life outcomes, and that will economically be better for Barking and Dagenham, because if that person is happy and fulfilled in their life, they're earning good money, they're putting that money back into the local economy, which means that other areas of the economy are lifted up. That means that they can then invest in kind of long-term, higher paid, higher skilled jobs. And what we're beginning to see some shoots coming out of that. So it's not just about construction in Barking and Dagenham now. If you look in the press, we're building a couple of film studios. We managed to get some inward investment from film studios, and we're doing exactly the same approach on those film studios as we are with the construction work. So we are encouraging the guys running the film studios to look at ways that they can increase opportunities for local people through apprenticeships, and again, high skilled, high paid, long-term jobs which are based in Barking and Dagenham, which mean that money goes back into the borough. And also starting to look at various areas of development with some tech in the north of the borough around Chadwell Heath Station. Same principle, that we're going to be looking at how we can use that to develop good quality, long-term, long-lasting jobs. That's what social value means to me and the job that I do.
Fantastic, Tom. Thank you. And I think that was a very good example of not looking at your initial direct impact through 25% local spend or 25% local businesses or people. It's about looking at that, it's broadening that agenda and looking at, well, what's the long-term impact we had. So on those three themes I was talking about of internal, product and external, it's really moving that decision making from Tom and his team into that external box, looking at the long-term legacies that investment can have. I think just to pick up on one point before we get to questions, just to explain the stark difference, and this happens throughout the country. It's within Leeds, it's within Manchester, within Birmingham. London is probably the most stark, is when you mentioned about life expectancy, Tom. If you live in Barking and Dagenham in London, you will die on average 10 years earlier than you will if you are born and live 5 miles up the road in Kensington. So that's the stark difference, and that's at the heart of what social value is. It's about reducing that inequality, about creating those opportunities. So to move on to the question and answer side of things, Hannah, I don't know if we've got somebody that would like to ask a question or a question from the chat.
Yeah, so Hannah has posted a question, and it says, she asks, is it important that organisations view or run their social value strategy internally, or would you encourage them to collaborate externally with local charities and community foundations, for example?
Okay, I will give a brief answer, and then I think I'll hand over to the panel. So one of the most important things with social value is about that collaboration. Ed mentioned the kind of value of their cross collaboration with the people that they work with on their products and services. The charities and the local social enterprise sector, the local charitable sector, the voluntary sector, know those communities better than anyone. So we would always say that a social value strategy, a social value plan needs to be developed and co-designed by those local communities to make sure that we're bringing their thinking into this. Firstly, I'd just like to go to Tom, if that's all right, to get your viewpoints on how that strategy was developed in tandem with communities and kind of what maybe outcomes you're beginning to see from that.
And because of we are linked, our organisation is linked to the council. The council has a department called Inclusive Growth, and it has a number of responsible people in there. So responsible people who are basically holding my feet to the fire for what they want delivered. And so what we did when we came up with the policy in the first place was we used both what I was looking at, what the council looking at target wise, and then we went out to some of the local the SMEs, some community groups. We've done some really good work with some community groups. We've done some co-design and some co-build projects that are beginning to come through. So the engagement from that perspective and making sure that they are on board with what we are doing as opposed to kind of driving it. I think for me, Rob, it's important that the organisations themselves hold the pen. It's about engagement as opposed to, so engagement's really important. It's about taking those ideas that the community presents to you and bringing them to something that is tangible but does meet those real goals. I think one of the risks, and I've seen it, is that if you listen, I say listen too much, but if you let your direction of travel be taken by one particular small group of people, then you might end up in a position where holistically you don't end up doing what's best for the overall community. And I think that's we've got a couple of estate regeneration panels of individuals who's local community members, and the very vocal community members. The really important point from us is that we need to make sure that we engage with the people who are less vocal. And somewhere like Barking and Dagenham, I use the example of the Gascoigne estate. If you look it up, it's about 3,500, 4,000 homes over the next kind of 10 years. Big estate regeneration, 72 different languages spoken on that estate, 72. The primary school, which is again, it's a big primary school, sort of 1,500 pupils. Has to deal with that, and it's hard. You get really important to make sure that you don't just listen to the people who talk, but you engage in those people who don't have a voice and don't have a voice for various reasons, or whether it be a language barrier, whether it be an education barrier.
And I'm going to just because this cross collaboration I think is so important, and there are organisations out there. So if you use Leeds as an example, the Leeds Community Foundation, Doing Good Leeds, that have that network of voluntary and community sector organisations that can provide that voice and provide that voice from the communities. So it's not something that as businesses you need to reinvent. There are organisations out there who already have that. But as well, to bring it on to another point around collaboration, it's also about cross-sector collaboration. And Tom, you mentioned engagement, and I just wanted to bring Ed in quickly here, because when you developed the music campaign that you mentioned, using the techniques you use to engage people in a music campaign to then translate that into a charitable or a social purpose campaign. I was just wondering whether you saw any difference, or how did that translate from one platform to the other?
I think there is clearly there is a difference there, but I think what we were able to do with that campaign is we could take the learnings that we had from creating something around music, where they the purpose of the project there is to sell albums or to, you know, have engagement from fans. We can take the learnings that we had and work with Tackle Africa for that project to create content that would engage people, and it kind of almost like a best practice that we took from our learnings within the commercial sector and that we could apply to that project and to that charity, that allowed them to create a really engaging platform that people were really happy to enjoy. And from the results of that, I mean, it was great. We delivered 14,000 pieces of content to 5,000 people who were on the platform, and that was great, because they wouldn't normally have that kind of access to those learnings and how best to do that. So it meant a lot to us that we could help them do that. And what you potentially think is just general knowledge around the kind of engagement of content, it meant quite a lot to them, and yeah, that was great.
No, thanks for that, Ed. And so I suppose definitely not wrapping up now, but you know, we're also wanting to learn from those businesses on the call today. How do you deliver your services? How do you engage with people? How do you use your products and services? And can we help you repurpose that into a social value context? Hannah, do we have any more questions?
We do. Samantha asks, I'm in the process of setting up a new CSR strategy, which will now be called Social Value, for the business I work for. Currently, they do nothing but have given me free rein on the strategy. Is there something specific I should be starting with or incorporating into the strategy from the offset?
Well, that's fantastic news, Samantha. So that's great to start with. Neil, I wondered whether you wanted to, from your perspective, whether there were key things that came out of your software that maybe were a starting point for Samantha.
Yeah, I guess so. Looking at the broad definitions of social value that are out there at the moment, you know, Chai has its definition, Rob, there's various other definitions out there. I think for me, Samantha, we work with a number of organizations that are sort of at that point in the journey where they know they're doing some stuff around CSR, if we can put it globally like that. They want to take a next step on that maturity level. And if you're looking at social value, then I think the key thing to remember is that irrespective of these different definitions you see, going back to like Rob's diagram earlier in the presentation, that looking at social value goes beyond what is and in fact the whole title of today, Rob, CSR is dead. It goes beyond that traditional thought of CSR of being like a philanthropic or a community investment side of thing, to being actually looking at everything that you're doing on environmental and sustainability, local and economic spend, diversity and inclusion, and many more aspects. So it's looking broadly across the board. So what we always when organizations at that sort of stage of the social value journey come to us, we would always say, so we have a framework of like 100 plus metrics that can come built into our software. And what we would normally do is furnish the organization with that and say, you know, where are the quick wins here? You know, look down that list and so what are you actually doing already, that where you can actually craft that social value strategy and social value story that you're doing. You know, you don't have to be absolutely revolutionary from day one, because quite often organizations are actually doing a lot of things already that they can that are classed as social value, and they don't even realize that social value. You know, it could be training programs that they're delivering. It could be new employment that they're delivering. It could be some sustainability programs that they have in place. So it's what I would say in summary is look broadly at what you're doing. Look at social value is the future of CSR, and it's not just, it very much encompasses those community aspects, but it goes way beyond that. So find a good definition of social value and look where your quick wins are and craft your initial strategy around that.
Thanks very much, Neil. And just to sort of build on that, really, it is just to reiterate, a lot of social value is being delivered already. So that's where I would start, like Neil said, finding out exactly what you do. Where do your ambitions lie as a business? Which of those themes do you feel are most aligned with your business and your business's purpose? And then where can you have that influence? So you might want to eradicate food poverty around the globe, but do you actually have an impact? Do you have an influence enough to be able to do that? Where does your business have that influence? And the last thing I would say, Samantha, is that we are actually hosting another event at the same time next week, which is going to delve a little bit more into this. How do you start? How do you begin to build your own social value framework? So I suppose it would be remiss of me not to say, join us next week, and hopefully we'll be able to delve into that for you a little bit more.
Shameless plug, Rob. I like it.
It is a shameless plug, but you know, it's a free option there. So, any other questions from attendees, Hannah?
Yeah, we've got a couple more. Joe asks, do businesses in tech have a responsibility to capitalise on COVID-enforced new ways of working to bring geographical diversity to their workforce?
Wow. Okay. So, does Joe want to? Can we sort of let Joe elaborate on that slightly? Taking from the question, what I think, just see if I've got this right, it's about embracing that flexible working patterns to have a broader and more diverse workforce from different geographical locations, whether that's around the UK or globally. Is that what I'm kind of getting from that question? If Joe's available?
Yeah, hi Rob. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's essentially. So I work for a consultancy based in London, and what I tend to find, and in general, leading universities, a lot of roles are kind of basically say for people who can either afford to live in London or whose parents can support them. And one of the perhaps benefits of new ways of working, especially kind of remotely through COVID, is it kind of opens up a lot more roles to people who perhaps can't afford to live in London. So do organisations have a responsibility to kind of perhaps essentially make more roles remote and capitalise on that to get more diversity in that sense in the workforce?
A fantastic question, and I think that the way that you have to look at this is if we look at the broad agenda of equality, diversity, inclusion. It's been proven many times that a more diverse workforce, a more cognitive diversity, different ways of thinking, different ways of tackling a project or tackling a problem or finding a solution. The more diverse workforce you have, the better your business will do in those areas. So I wouldn't maybe focus on the responsibility of the businesses to do that. It's more about the opportunity to bring a more diverse workforce. And yes, I think that flexible working and remote working and all of those things allow for that to happen, and for that opportunity to be there for businesses to embrace a more diverse workforce, rather than what possibly has been an excuse of the past is, well, we can't access them, they can't afford to live here, etc., etc. There is an opportunity there. I don't know whether any of the other panels want to chip in on this one.
I think you're totally correct. I think it's less about responsibility. Certainly for us, it wasn't something that we had really considered prior to the pandemic. The idea of remote work, being available or completely manageable. I think we've found over the course of the past 18 months, we have taken on people from Swansea, from Bristol, from Manchester. And that's it. I mean, it's been amazing because they all bring something very different to the team. And I'm not sure if, yeah, as you said, Rob, I'm not sure if responsibility is the right word, but it is an opportunity for us to have more diverse work, a more diverse workspace. And it's yeah, I mean, it's been great. It's been fantastic. But I wouldn't say a responsibility so much as an opportunity to do something good.
So on from a social value perspective, Rob, though, you've got to be careful in how you support. So if you are so from my perspective, I said my key target area is apprentices. I don't want to be employing apprentices from all over the country to work remotely and come down 1 day a week, because they won't learn and they'll fall off. And what I've actually found is that in my organisation, 3 of my apprentices that I employed 2 years ago haven't made it to level 4 because of this lockdown and the fact that we haven't been in the office, and they haven't been engaged, and therefore moved on to do other careers. So I think there's a delicate balance you've got to reach there. And I do think that senior people in organisations have a responsibility to ensure that they look after the workforce, and whether that means that if there's opportunity to have people working from all over the country, great. But I also think that particularly from a training and development perspective, there's got to be some face-to-face interaction on a regular basis.
And it's a very good point, Tom. A very good point. So it comes back to that realizing where you can seek those opportunities, where you can improve that diversity geographically,
absolutely,
and where maybe, as you say, definitely the training and development of that new individual, trainee, apprentice, new graduate means that actually they need to be based more in the office. Hannah, have we got any other?
We do. Okay, so this one is for Neil, but I suspect that a couple of the other members of the panel may have an opinion on this one as well. Would you say that philanthropic giving is dead?
I like that question. Neil, over to you.
Rob, I think I would like you to chip out on this one too. Yeah, I think the overall sentiment of people doing good is certainly not dead, and underpins everything that we're doing. I think, and certainly if you look, philanthropic giving in terms of billionaires setting up foundations, organizations setting up foundations, it is still there. I think so. It is not dead, but I think the thing that is very encouraging for me is that with the progression of this CSR, sustainability, ESG, social value agenda, whatever acronym or name you put on it, the great thing is that there is now a clear business case for it, because there are only ever a portion of people that would be philanthropic enough to want to give. But actually now, if we can actually articulate and craft a clear business case, even those most hard-nosed business executives can find a reason to invest. And I think that's the fantastic thing about where we're at in this whole evolution. At this point, we're at that tipping point where the business case has become clear. So it's not dead, but I think that with this evolution, we can do so much more.
I would agree with what you said, Neil. I don't think philanthropic giving is dead. I think 2 things. I think 1, it's just become part of a bigger scope. So it's become part of what we would term as this whole social value agenda piece. So it's not just about philanthropic giving. It's about your culture as a business and the purpose of your business as well. Charitable giving or philanthropic giving is not just to waylay guilt at its worst. The other side of things with philanthropic giving is that there are organisations out there that are embedded. We've got Leeds Community Foundation on the call, I think. There are organisations out there that know where that money is going to make most amount of impact and most amount of change within those communities and within those social value themes that we were talking about. So for me, it's also about that decision of how that philanthropic giving is managed and how that is directed to make that positive change within those communities. One of the things I was going to mention around the whole agenda of social value is that, this is nothing new. If we go back to the Victorian philanthropists, It was a business decision why they built those model villages. They wanted healthier staff because that means they didn't die. And that meant that they had more of a productive workforce. There was always business decisions that were embroiled within that philanthropic activity. I think nowadays we've just managed to combine it within this social value agenda. Hannah, have we got any other questions or comments, or are there any other from attendees that they'd like to raise?
There's no more questions. Katie makes the comment that she agrees with Tom. There is a tension between achieving social value and employment of local people versus the benefits of recruiting from diverse locations. Both are valuable, but they are in conflict.
I think, so first of all, hello, Katie. When we were talking about where Chai Consultancy started from, Katie was one of the sort of early adopters, I suppose you could say, and really key partners for what was called Construction Leeds. I think Katie brings up a very good point. I don't know whether, Katie, you want to elaborate on that comment at all? Putting her on the spot now.
Yes, I can do. It's just finding the right button to press. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just it's something that I do find quite interesting in terms of that. However our new ways of working are going to work in the future, and that idea of what it means to be a good employer that's embedded in the sort of within your local environment, within your local context, when so much of your employee base in the future, may well be based quite your workforce may not actually have any connection to the place that you as a business are located. And so it's that it's more of a philosophical point, I guess, in some ways. It's about what is the connection between a business and its place as this sort of idea of remote working becomes more just part and parcel of more and more types of business. Rather than just the sort of knowledge or the sort of knowledge economy where it's been at the moment, as that type of working becomes more pervasive across different sectors, how does that change the relationship of businesses to their places? So I don't know whether anyone wants to comment on that, but that was what was sort of driving my earlier comment.
I think you raise a very good question, and I'll come on to my thoughts, but I don't know whether any of the panel members want to put forward their thoughts on this. Maybe Tom, based on the local agenda within Barking and Dagenham and the KPIs that are actually put on yourselves from the local council around that local agenda.
I think I'm lucky that you've got quite a diverse workforce. The problem we've got, so the Barking and Dagenham has a tremendously diverse workforce with people from all sorts of different backgrounds, from different countries. So we tick boxes, Rob, that's the right word, but like from a diversity perspective, difficulty we have is how do we engage those people to ensure that we do end up with a diverse workforce. And we do still, I know it's construction, but I do still have a serious problem with white man. So every vacancy we advertise through the and that, whether that is apprentices, trying to get school leavers, all the way through to experienced workers, bringing people back into the workforce, it is a white man, and it's a really difficult thing to break down when you're building stuff. That this industry has a opportunities for everyone in doing lots of different things, and talking tech sector, bringing tech into it, like digital twin, BIM, etc. Big area that we can encourage a more diverse workforce. The frustration for me is that whilst we might have a it's not quite, I think so, it's only about 52% of the people who live in Barking and Dagenham now are white British, but most of the people who apply for any of the roles or come into the workforce are white British or white Eastern European, and male. That's something that we need to work out how we address long term as a construction industry problem.
And I think, thanks for that, Tom. And I think as well, I think it is around that kind of education piece, around, you know, the digital, you know, the non-traditional aspects of, particularly with the built environment. And I think that does reflect on the tech sector as well. Working with organisations like the Coders Guild to educate people about what opportunities are in the digital sector will bring that broader workforce in. To pick up on Katie's point, I think that as social value became, particularly within the public sector, I think there was this focus on local spend and local jobs. But as that agenda has broadened, I think what we term as the intelligent client has broadened as well. And the themes that local authorities may be asking for or to be looking for is not just about numbers of jobs or numbers of apprentices within a local area. It is broader, so that also gives the opportunity for them to take into consideration other impacts that may have. Now, using a practical example, I realise again this is within the built environment, which is where a lot of this history of social value is pervasive, is around off-site manufacturing. So within the business, obviously, more environmentally friendly is off-site manufacturing, but that factory may not be in Leeds, for instance. But what that allows us to do is look at where that investment can benefit Leeds. So it's just about taking a slightly different approach, not focusing on local spend or local jobs, but maybe focusing on education or skills or a better outcome for that building, a more flexible long-term outcome that has increased productivity for local people, that will create more jobs in the operation of that business in the future because of the way it's been designed and built. So I just think, to answer the philosophical point, I think we are beginning to see a more intelligent and holistic approach to social value that will broaden that local agenda. That's not taking away from the importance of local impact. I just think that local impact will broaden from jobs and apprenticeships into, or spend into, a broader set of themes that can have an impact on that local community.
Rob, if I could chip in there,
of course, Neil.
in a sort of related but slightly different point, given that we're at the digital festival, a lot of digital companies are availing of remote working. We're doing so very successfully prior to COVID as well. And yeah, I think that is, they asked that question or raised that point about connection to place. I think I would say two things from sort of our experience of working with people. One, whenever you end up with a lot of remote working, distributed workforce, wherever it is, it is so important to be so clear on your purpose and your values and your communication of those through the organization. But also looking at some real success stories from the companies we've worked with, who have sort of professional services firms who have always had a very distributed, if not remote workforce. It's ensuring that in each location that there is someone that's actually responsible for understanding that message and applying it on the ground in that location, so that there's so that the broader company agenda is actually translated into something meaningful in that location to help the engagement of the employees and engagement with the local communities in that area. So just slightly related points, but just some insights from the work we have done, Rob.
Thank you very much, Neil. Hannah, do we have any more comments or questions from the floor as such, as we would if we were in a conference room?
No, that's it for now.
Okay, well, 11:15, so good timings. Just before I just kind of wrap up things, I have mentioned, and as Neil said, it was a shameless plug. The same time next week, we are beginning to, hopefully today, we've given you a kind of introduction to what social value is, why it's important, why should you bother as a business. But you will probably go away from today thinking, I've got so many thoughts, so many thinking. How do I streamline these things? How does it become process? How does it become policy? How do I engage with an organization like Neil's to actually begin putting together a framework? There you go, shameless plug for you there as well, Neil. How do I begin to sort of embed this within my business? How does it, where are we as a business going to make the most difference? The event next week is very much more based around that. How can we start to put together social value frameworks for businesses? How do you start thinking in that way of creating that purpose that's, you know, that's measurable, that can help you win public sector tenders, can help you answer investor questions, private investment questions around your environmental and social governance. So if you haven't done already, then sign up to our event next week. The second shameless plug is that there's a lot of information. We're going to be sharing the slides around today and some of the comments that were raised. On the last slide, there is a link to our website there. And there's a lot of information on there around social value from our point of view, from a Chai consultancy perspective, about embedding social value throughout that project process or throughout that policy process within your business. So go along to our website and have a look. And again, if you've got any comments, please just give us a ring. So to wrap up today, I just wanted to pick up on some of the really key points that were raised by people within the room and the panel members. I think Neil just highlighted just on the last comment there, it is so important to be clear. Businesses that try and do everything have very little impact on everything. So be clear about the purpose of your business. Put your time and resources and energy into areas that you are going to make the most difference. Where does your influence lie? Be clear about that purpose. Be clear about the purpose and the social value agenda that you want to tackle. Ed spoke about the transfer of commercial products into products that have benefits to society, whether that's, you know, the example used is taking technology and intellectual property and the thinking around it, how to engage people in a commercial music campaign and translate that to support a charity and their services to improve the sexual health of young people in Africa, transferring that learning, transferring that expertise into a more purpose-driven campaign. And I think that's where a lot of what's now called the tech for good area, I think there's a lot of benefit that can come out of that, both for commercial businesses and for communities and for those operating within the social enterprise sphere and charitable spheres. Tom brought up right at the beginning about this importance of long term. You know, it's not just about ticking boxes. It's not just about looking at how you can create a nice PR pamphlet. It's about that long-term impact that your business is having. How can that create 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years? How can we actually change that impact into long-term outcomes? How are we trying to move the direction of the oil tanker to make sure that we're in a new direction as a business with an embedded purpose? And from Chai's point of view, it's always been around this holistic approach right from the beginning. It is about all of your impacts, both positive and negative. And I think if there's one thing that I could sort of leave you with today is when going away and thinking about your personal social value or the social value of business, is really just to try and think about it in one way. What is your impact on people? What is it? How are you having an impact on a person? Put yourself in their shoes. Think about it from a different angle. The more diverse workforce, the more brains, the more creativity you have will allow you to delve into that further. But it's really about the decisions you make as a business, just thinking about them from a different angle. And if that becomes the culture of your business, as Neil said previously, you'll start to generate massive amounts of social value, whether you call it social value or not. It's just about thinking and about a different way of making decisions based on the value that those decisions create. So thank you very much for attending today. I hope you found it useful. As I said, get in touch, join us next week. It's on the Leeds Digital Festival website. We'll send out the slides and we'll send out a link to next week's event. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I hopefully look forward to speaking to some of you, all of you, at some point in the near future. Thank you to our panel, Tom, Ed and Neil, and as well thank you to my colleague Hannah, who's been there in the background making sure people are in and can be heard. So thank you very much and have a good day.